with our good friend. He is chairman of Boyer Research. He is a Forbes contributor. If you've turned on Fox lately, you've seen him all over the place. Jerry Boyer. Welcome back, Jerry.
Hey, Crane, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Happy
And
Monday, Thursday to you.
happy Monday, Thursday to you, sir. I wanted to begin with President Obama yesterday actually speaking to jobs training, because it goes into a conversation that has been ongoing between us, which is about statism and what the impact of statism is. So here is a statement that he made yesterday in Pittsburgh. Roll it.
But here's the challenge, and a lot of folks here know it. A lot of people don't feel that progress in their own lives yet. So the stock market's doing great. Corporate profits are soaring. Folks at the very, very top are doing better than ever. But too many Americans, if they're lucky enough to have a job, are working harder and harder just to get by, much less to get ahead. For too many middle-class Americans, it feels as if the same trends that have been going on for decades are continuing. Right? You're working hard, but wages flatline, incomes flatline, costs of everything else going up.
Speaking to the issue of taxation, speaking to the issue of statism,
Yeah.
and really, let's go to the heart of the issue. Tomorrow recognizes the day our Lord and Savior was crucified by the state.
Executed by the state. Yes.
Your thoughts?
Well, he was. He was an enemy of the state almost his entire life. Herod the Great. We would sort of gloss over these parts of the story, to kind of get to the religious-y parts of the gospel. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to go just to the religious-y parts, because it's not just the Gospels aren't just religious documents. Jesus was born under difficult circumstances. The translators can disagree about whether he was born in a stable or whether he was born in the part of the house where the animals were kept, but he was a refugee. His family they were refugees. They were refugees because Caesar Augustus decided that all the world should be taxed. And since men were simply extensions of the state, and Caesar was God, or Son of God, actually was his literal title, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. The title Son of God was not a new one when it was given to Jesus. Jesus was being given the title that Caesar had been given to himself. Everyone had to go back to their ancestral home, no matter how inconvenient it was, no matter how difficult it was. A typical bureaucratic order. Doesn't matter if you're pregnant. Doesn't matter if you live way up in the northern provinces of Israel and Galilee of the Gentiles, but your ancestral home is way down in south of Jerusalem in Bethlehem. That doesn't matter. The rules have been written. The decree from the state has gone out. The regulations are unchangeable, so you have to make this terrible, arduous journey with a pregnant wife. So Jesus was born under very difficult circumstances as being oppressed by the state. He was the rightful king of Israel. The genealogies showed that. But genealogies were illegal. It's interesting, when people read the Gospels, they say, well, I like the Gospels, but the genealogies are boring. Well, to most people reading it then, the genealogies were the really exciting part because they were the risky part. There was only one official genealogy, and Herod had it burned because he didn't qualify as the king of Israel, didn't even qualify as an Israelite. So writing a genealogy of Jesus was a profoundly subversive act towards the state. So Herod the Great sets out to have Jesus executed as a child. They become refugees again. Instead of tax refugees, now they become refugees from persecution, from political persecution. They defy the king's orders. The wise men from the east defy the state and lie to the state about where Jesus is. They sneak a different way. They warn. They warn the Holy Family. The Holy Family illegally crosses the border and hides from the state in Egypt until Herod the Great dies, and at which point they come back. And we can go through the life of Jesus, but over and over again we see a clash between Jesus on the one side and Caesar and his puppet Herod on the other side. So there's a lot going on there about politics and economics and statism in the gospel that we just skip over because we're used to reading it as a book about how to go to heaven, and it definitely is a book about how to go to heaven. But it's also a book that tells us how to help stop this world from becoming hell on earth, which is what happens under socialist dictatorships.
When you hear the president, and we make it clear it's not about the president, it's about the office of the president and the policies that come out of that in that sense. I want to make, oftentimes we talk about that. We also have done a show, go back and check the log that Jerry Boyer was on a number of years ago when we said we would love for him to succeed. Unfortunately, the policies that he has put forth really are not capable of doing that without a miracle.
Yes.
And so, Jerry, you hear the president talk about more job training programs, talking about what seems to be a finite pie as opposed to what he has blessed us with in the sense of the possibility of infinite growth, in the sense of being able to expand, not just cut up and determine and divide.
Right.
So when you hear these types of policies being described as compassionate and this is what we need, you see the state stepping in because freedom has failed
Yes.
society.
Yes.
Your thoughts?
Well, hey, job training programs are great if there are jobs to go to. But if your economic growth policies create stagnation so that there are no jobs to go to, then no job training program can help you get a job that doesn't exist because there's no profit to pay that job. So you have to have a dynamically growing economy in order for job training programs to be effective. Job training programs prepare you for jobs. And so we see, around the world, job training programs are something that are more or less effective, basically depending on the dynamic nature of the economy. But one thing is clear. Let's kind of stay with the Holy Week theme here.
Sure.
It's Maundy Thursday, which is from the Latin mandatus, which is a participle for commandments. What is commanded? Sorry. It's a passive participle. Sorry, the Latin's a little way back in my history. A passive participle for what is commanded. So what's commanded on Maundy Thursday? It is to serve and to humble yourself. This is the day we commemorate the fact that Jesus got down on his hands and knees and washed his disciples' dirty, smelly disciple feet with his divine incarnated hands. And that tells us that Jesus was, in addition to being God, also a great man, that he was humble. And that tells us we're supposed to be humble as well. That also contrasts with Good Friday because we have the two kinds of kings. Today, we see the good kind of king. The good kind of king is not about power. He's not about coercion. He's not being about being above and over people. He's about being underneath and washing their feet down under people, holding them up and serving them. He's a servant king. Tomorrow, we'll see the other king. Tomorrow, the other king, Herod, on behalf of Caesar, will have the good king executed. Those are our two models of the state, our two models of kingship. One is a servant, the other is a tyrant. John Locke goes back to that story in some of his writings, especially his writings on religious liberty in the 1600s and 1700s, and builds the case for liberty on that story. We are free because Locke had a huge influence on the founding fathers of the United States. We are free partly because Locke saw the kind of king that Jesus was based on what he did on Maundy Thursday. We, however, in America are moving more towards the Herodian Caesar model. We're moving more towards bread and circuses. The kind of king who says, and let's face it, presidents are becoming more and more like kings. The kind of king who says, well, we're making a lot of progress, but you don't feel it you don't feel it. But give me more power, and then you'll feel the progress, is not the Thursday king. He's the Friday king at some level. I'm not saying that Obama would go out and kill his enemies. That's a more virulent form of it. But it is the king who serves versus the king who coerces. Power does not create jobs. Love and service and God-given gifts are what creates jobs and economic growth and incomes.
Speak to the argument made by those interpreting the Bible as an argument for statism, for socialism, and say, well, what happens under the freedom is the servants are serving the masters of capitalism.
Well, what happens under freedom is everybody has to serve somebody, otherwise they're not making money. Mm-hmm. Under a free market system, you can, if you don't have the power of coercion, then you can only, my friend George Gilder says, this is why the free market system, whether we call it capitalism, is a different question, but under the free market system, the first thing that's required is that you either have to love your neighbor or you at least have to act like you love your neighbor, because you have to do something for your neighbor that they can't do for themselves that they really want done, so that they're willing to pay you for it. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't abuses in our system, because there's crony capitalism, which is about power.
Through coercion, though. That's only, you only get crony capitalism is force from the government. In essence, it is coercion.
That's right. It is coercion. And, you can even make a case that we see abuses even in the free market system.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure at some point in your life you've had bosses who've abused their power. I know.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone listening to us has at some point had a boss that abused their power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, here's the situation. If too many bosses abuse their power, it gives the free market a bad name, and people cry for socialism as protection against the abusive boss. And, of course, socialism's worse than the abusive boss. And bosses that abuse their power. You know what? I don't work for bosses who abuse me anymore.
There it is.
You try to get away from them.
Yes.
Right? Talented people migrate away from abusive bosses. Mm-hmm. So abusive bosses have a lot of trouble retaining the best people. My friend Rich Carlgard, he's the publisher of Forbes, has a new book out about this, where he talks about in the era of high-frequency technological change, you have to be a servant boss. You have to be an inspiring boss. You have to instill trust, because you need people to give you their best, and they won't give you their best if they don't like you.
And that is really what is interesting to me, is that you don't deny that abuses can and will occur and have occurred. But in recognizing that, you recognize the system that will benefit the individual the best. What I see from people defending the state is the denial that that will occur because they deny human nature. 1 minute left. Your thoughts?
Well, my main thought is the problem of abusive bosses is not solved by creating a world of one boss, the state. The problem of abusive bosses is by creating a world of many, 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 many bosses, many opportunities, many, competition between bosses for the best employees. And the best answer for anyone listening to me right now who feels abused by the free market system because they're in a situation where they're not treated with dignity is get the right education, get the right skill set, get your productivity up so that you have your pick of what company to work for.
Yes.
In the meantime, look, every human system has sin in it. The difference is socialism has sin plus coercion, sin plus the death penalty as the ultimate thing backing up that sin, where in the free market system, it's just sin, but still with competition and free choice.
Jerry Bowyer, happy Easter to you. Thank you. Great to be with you. Crane Durham's